religion. Pass my greetings to Dr. MUKHISA, Rafael Sekon. Good morning to Martin KITUYI boy. Good morning. Naona Obong Joseph tuned in from the shores of the Indian Ocean. Good to see you. Will Cliff Wanyama. Asante Njoka Wakatuse. Good to see you this morning. Quite really. Nimeona mambo yetu sawa, inashughulikiwa, is being worked on, inashughulikiwa haraka upesi, mambo itakuwa shwari zaidi. Naona Wanjiku Maji anasema tuned in from Lanka, USA. Morning, may good health and blessings be upon you all. Asante sana. Jacqueline Chebichi, good morning. Let's confirm that it's fine now. Becky Dion check corona. Op Bank CIC Plaza Upper Hill. Asante sana. Joroge, I can see you. Twarudi. Authority amesema sawa iko fiti. Please when you join in, please like. When you like, we get to know that you're watching us, and that like, please share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. Tutalipa madeni kwanza. Naona watu wameamka sana mapema, so tutalipa madeni kwanza, alafu tuingie kazi haraka upesi. Na tutaanza na Maridadi Motors. Maridadi Motors inakupa nafasi ya kuweza kuagiza gari kwa bei nafuu zaidi. When you import with Maridadi Motors, you get to save up to 300,000 Kenyan shillings ukiweza kuingiza gari ama kuagiza gari kutoka Maridadi Motors. The best thing is you can choose wherever you want to import from, whether Singapore, Australia, Dubai, Japan, ama kila mahali ambapo unataka kuingiza gari. Pia Maridadi Motors gives you an opportunity to invest your money. Ama kuna hela ambayo imelala mahali fulani, you can invest your money in the import to sell model and you get one up to 15% returns on your investment. 15% returns on your investment. Maridadi Motors also gives you an opportunity to save for two reasons. If you want to save for a car unit, you can save up to 50%. That is a minimum of 6 months. 50%. Alafu gari basi unaanza kuendeza pole pole ukilipa ile nyingine asilimia nyingine. If you're also saving in the circle for investment purposes, you can also earn 15% on your returns for the money that you put on Maridadi Motorcycle. If you also want to be a good driver, you can only go and learn or to drive on Maridadi Driving Academy or Driving School, Driving Academy. So that's Maridadi Motors gives an opportunity to do direct imports. That's the best thing to do. And we've talked about last week that you import directly, you cut all these things in between. Nasikia kuna broker Njoroge yako Kimani nani kumutu wameingia kila mahali katikati, define that the value of cars are going up. So when you import directly, you ensure that you get the best deal. As Maridadi Motors on Kiambu Road, you get the best deal on imported cars and also get the best deal on your money that you invest with them. Also, Rexer Roofing gives you an opportunity to do a beautiful roofing on your house. Rexer Roofing, quality roofing shingles. And why we've said shingles every time is that it gives you a guarantee of 50 years. I don't know where you will be in the next 50 years, but I can guarantee you that your roof will still be there. So Rexer Roofing, quality roofing shingles, stone-coated tiles, and also gives you an opportunity to put on water harvesting gutters for reasons where you want to harvest water, kama unataka harvest maji, or you also want to ensure that your house looks beautiful. There's no mess on drainage. You can use your PVC water harvesting gutters to ensure that you're harvesting your water safely. If you're also building flat roofs, is a trend that's coming in. So you can waterproof by waterproofing membranes ama waterproofing liquid. So Rexer Roofing gives you an all-round roofing solution. Majamaa pia airtime pale enda Swift Airtime, bay bill number 325325, business number, nambari yako ya simu. Watu wazigo pia, mzigo yako inafika shwari kwa njia rahisi zaidi. D-Square also pale Eldoret. If you want to look good, as I'm looking this morning, these things are coming from D-Square, where you can go to D-Square pale Aketia building 4th floor, alafu basi unaweza kupea mungaro alisi zaidi. Asante sana. Hao ni D-Square, where anakisha kwamba you dress to be addressed. You dress to be addressed. Haya, Shaza Jeps nakuwa nasema gari yenye mafuta imepanda hivi toka. Haya. Unajua hata kama mafuta imepanda bei, au utatembea kwenda mpaka Mumias. Lazima utapanda matatu au utapanda gari bado unajipata kwenye gari. Anyway, this is the morning of the 21st September, and it's a State of the Nation Daktari MUKHISA KITUYI, a presidential aspirant, is going to tell us what vision he has for this country. Tuko pia na Sir Eric Mwangi hapa, will be also helping us to shape the conversations on business. Atatuambia watu wa biashara pia wanataka kuwa na nini kwenye urais. And that is it. It begins now. Good morning, Eriko.
Good morning, bro. How are you?
Salama sana. It's been a long time.
Thank you for having me. And I'm very delighted to have one of our seniors in the country. Today I'm on the asking side.
You're on the asking side today.
I'm here to learn from Daktari.
It's a pleasure to have you. You had fired yourself, but I see you have rehired yourself.
I am back. I have rehired myself.
Asante sana, Daktari. Good morning.
Morning.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
You know, I've been hunting you down for 2 years now.
Well, you've been hunting the wrong places. And finally, it's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, maybe it was just appropriate time for me to come.
It's a brilliant Kenyan. To be honest, we grew up admiring how you were doing things at that time in the ministry.
And why do you stop admiring once you have
We're
grown
still admiring. I'm saying we grew up, now we are grown-ups and we're still admiring what you're doing, and you want to see how best you can, what vision you would have for this country. But before that, maybe I want to give you an opportunity to say hi to these Kenyans. A lot of Kenyans here in diaspora, but in diaspora, you've seen guys in Australia, in the UK, Commonwealth United Kingdom. We're seeing guys in France as well, guys in Dubai. We're seeing people as well in Netherlands. I mean, maybe you can say hi to this.
Yes, thank you very much. To people around the world, those back here in Kenya at home, and those in the diaspora. You know, I many times feel like I'm the first diaspora candidate to be president of Kenya. I have lived and worked and studied outside Kenya for 17 years.
Wow.
So I could be very much a representative of the diaspora, and I appreciate them. I know the importance to the country, and I know how they keep our flag high. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening.
Oh, okay. You know, here times we forget. We think it's good morning everywhere. So we say good morning, and we forget that it's 5 p.m. somewhere. Let's say it's 5 p.m. somewhere. So Daktari, where have you been? Mambo mingi. Tulikuwa na halafu kapotea kidogo.
Ilikuwa necessary wakati nimekuja kutoka nje. Siasa ya Kenya iko namna hii. Kwamba there is a certain audience which is looking for you in media. Which is looking for what you say on policy, which is looking for your reaction to every news item that comes by the day, you know, managing by your mouth. But then there is also another reality that I've been out of the country for a substantial time, like 8 years. In fact, if you add the 2 years I was in Washington at the Brookings Institution, it's like 9 years I've been out of Kenya since I left active politics. A lot of people have come of age while I've been away. But also importantly, Kenyans expect your credibility politically to be demonstrated by what nows you have in the ethnic constituency you come from. So with the lockdown and inability to do things on an open platform aggressively, cleanly, I decided to spend a substantial amount of time just building networks, first and foremost in Western Kenya, although I've done quite a bit also in Coast. But primarily I wanted to get the Luya community to remember who KITUYI was and understand who KITUYI is today. And then I tell them, you know, you do my campaigning for me at home, let me face the rest of the country. So I'm just coming to the end of that phase through some activities which you'll be seeing this coming weekend. And that is the starting point of my more national outreach.
Okay. So you've been in Western Kenya building your roots?
Yes, quite a bit. Kind of cultivating my roots, weeding and watering.
When people come from the diaspora, Daktari, sometimes they feel like the reception is not meeting their expectation. They feel like, you know, people expect too much from them.
That's a problem for people who have very large egos. I've never come into Kenya politics thinking that everybody owes me applause. You know, so I did not have too much expectation of what people knew about me. I knew that a lot of younger Kenyans have heard of the name KITUYI, they've seen it in the papers. But I was in politics when they were too young, but I was also in politics when there was not live coverage of parliamentary debate. So they couldn't get a sense of what kind of person, what's the depth, what's the content of KITUYI. Yeah. So this is a narrative I have to reconstruct for them. And I think that's part of the challenge of campaigning.
And as you rightly put it, I am one of the Kenyans who has probably properly matured in the 9 years that you've been away.
Right.
And one of the things that I've been asking myself is, why do you want to be president of Kenya? We look like we are a country that is completely out of shape. You had a beautiful job out there.
There are two things about it. First of all, there's this notion that I had a good job and I leave it and come into this bad exercise. I think we should not take power in Kenya as a pension scheme. There are different types of politicians. The politicians who look for a long queue and jump to the front of it because it is possible to do that and get a prestigious job. But there are some of us who over the years have held this very strong belief that Kenya deserves better than it is getting. The Kenyan population mainstream is miles ahead of its politicians. And one of the challenges of resuscitating hope for the hopeless, giving a ray of hope for the unemployed and underemployed youth, turning around the prospects of a declining competitive economy, coming to terms with the reality that someday we must slay the monster of corruption, that it needs some believers And when you're a believer, you go to a course. You've tried it many times, you've made some gains, you've not totally succeeded, but I felt that I still had the energy and the physical shape to give my final years of public life to seeking to be the solution to the Kenyan that I crave for my descendants. So it's a kind of calling. Some of us believe that you don't want to stand back and say, I wish I did something, I could have made a difference. This is the opportunity to try to do that something that will make a difference.
Okay. All right. So since you've been in Western, maybe you can go back there a bit.
Yes.
Before you even bring it up to speed.
Yeah.
You grew up in Western.
Well, I mean, I was born there. I went through primary school there. And if that's growing up there, yes. But then I went to high school in St. Mary's Yala, which is in Luo Nyanza, and Nairobi University. Expelled by Moi, I ended up in Makerere on a refugee scholarship in Scandinavia. The rest is history.
Yeah, but I was born by Moi.
Yes. I have two kind of bookmarkers on multipartism.
Okay.
I was a student leader at Nairobi University when Moi introduced in Parliament legislation to change the constitution of Kenya to make Kenya by law a one-party state. This was meant to preempt the formation of opposition parties by Oginga Odinga and George Anyona. The university was closed, and 5 of us were expelled, including myself, the late Otieno Kajwang, Rumba Kinuthia, Josiah Omoto, and we ended up in Makerere University, Uganda. That's where we finished our undergraduate studies.
That's how Moi kicked you out of the country.
Well, he kicked me out of the country, but I came back to try to kick him out of power.
Did it work?
Well, eventually it did work. I don't think Moi would have stopped being president if we hadn't succeeded partially in the repeal of Section 2A. I was expelled so that it was created, and I came back and helped to repeal it. Yeah.
Now, Daktari is someone now who has that broad history of this country,
yes,
both in terms of the political struggle, the social struggle, and even the economic struggle. How would you paint a picture of a successful Kenya? How should it look like when you're president?
This is something I've been saying to quite a few interlocutors of change, that I don't envisage success at this stage to be who wins the next election. I went to define success as Kenya getting back on track to be a middle-income country with its people at peace with themselves, respecting their diversity, but proud in their Kenyan identity, with increasing opportunities of unlocking the potential of younger people, particularly their talents in sport, in the creatives industry, in the digital space, and in other endeavors. This is the Kenya I look to, and I don't see any reason why it should not be competing with Thailand instead of competing with Burundi and Somalia.
We look at Somalia as our peers and Burundi. So anyway, Daktari, so here we are. You are in a nation, you came back, you've been away, you said for close to 9 years. You're back home. I'm sure you've been able to get a feel of the country the way it is. There's a government here that we elected 3 times in 2017. And you want to be the next president. But what's your feeling of the way things are? What is the state of the nation according to you?
The state of the nation is not in a very good place.
Okay.
Of course, one of the biggest struggles that we're dealing with right now is the COVID pandemic and its aftermath. COVID, apart from massively disrupting certain sectors of the economy, like the tourism and safari and hoteling related services. It has also shattered certain small and medium enterprises. Every other day I see buses, country buses, taking people going to Kavirondo, carrying their beds and furniture. Usually you associated that with funeral. That the main man of the family has died, and the family is going back to Nyalugunga. But now you find that exit from the city without a funeral. What does it mean? That I left difficult circumstances in the countryside when I migrated to town with hope. I am experiencing a more painful life in town than the difficult life I had in the countryside. So I'm voting with my feet to go back to what I thought was hopeless. That's a very damning statement.
It's going back to Egypt.
Yes, a damning statement about the state of the economy. But there are also other struggles. Today, most families and friends and relatives and politicians are spending a disproportionate amount of money paying hospital bills because of COVID-related sicknesses. So this is one major stream of problem. If you look at COVID, how it's impacting business, I've given a very, very clear example recently. If you're running a small bar in Nairobi, first of all, you had to face the Muchuto rules that reduce the number of hours you're opening. From 2 o'clock, when where you used to open at 11 o'clock, now you open at 5 o'clock. Now, you struggle to make ends meet, opening at 5 and closing at 11. And then COVID comes. You reduce the hours now from 5 until 8 o'clock, sometimes even 7 o'clock. So you have cut down by more than 75% the working hours that you projected when you're starting business. Secondly, your clientele is reduced. Money is going into servicing COVID conditions, and many people have taken off to order Chupa Chap online. And third, very importantly, you have not seen a decline in the number of taxes you face. In fact, you have seen an increase. Apart from the traditional inspections of health, of environment, of fire, city authority licenses, national government licenses, you now have county governments increasing new assessors. So the costs are going up. The cost of petroleum is added as an additional pain. The number of working hours has gone down, and you are still hopeful that you can operate and pay rent and pay salaries to staff. So this is a struggle related to COVID. But the state of this nation is not just COVID-bound. There are pre-existing conditions which are even more fundamental. A very dramatic decline in our credit worthiness as a country, with the mushrooming public debt, which is, if you just checked what the governor of the central bank presented to the parliamentary Senate Committee on Finance, it's 67% of government income now goes to pay debt.
But let me pick your mind on something.
If you just look at that before you go on, it is a phenomenon that has to chill you. Kenyan goods are less competitive than goods from the neighboring countries. When I was minister, Kenya was the largest exporter of manufactured goods to Uganda and Tanzania. Today, the Kenyan companies that exported to those countries are manufacturing in those countries and exporting to Kenya. Kenyan agriculture is virtually on deathbed. Primary production, you go to Western Kenya, you see the flood of eggs and maize and pineapple from Uganda entering the Kenyan market. Lunga, trucks full of Tanzanian maize. An import economy with a mushrooming public debt is nothing heritage to pick with to our children. The biggest problem is that much political discourse is not informed by any consciousness of this problem. We're acting as if we're just in paradise, Sunday picnic. We're not talking about this problem. If you don't identify the real problems, if you cannot diagnose the real problems, you cannot prescribe a sound solution. So people just sound bite some solutions because they have read about them and are not even conscious of what role they have played in creating the problem. Are part of the problem, not part of the solution. I think this is the challenge that we face as a country.
But the dissonance, Daktari, is on, you've narrated very well the pain of the small businesses in the country, for example. But the financial sector of the country doesn't seem to be telling the same story. You know, bank after bank has reported a bigger profit each quarter after every quarter.
That's right.
And can we pick your mind on this phenomenon? How is it that Kenyan banks continue to be highly profitable in an environment when every other business is crying? Is it that they are more smart than everybody else?
The banking sector is a smart vulture. It is nourished by collective crisis. What has happened? When a government does not know how to live within its means, it borrows externally, it borrows domestically. When government is borrowing so much at very, very credible interest rates domestically, only a foolish banker will spare money and employ staff to go and assess businesses and individuals who want to take loans.
Small boys.
So the small boys. So by the government being such a monster with an appetite, unlimited appetite for borrowing domestically, all banks have to do is reduce their staff to reduce their overheads, hire a few computer clerks who can then buy online government paper to keep lending money to government. There is no overhead cost. You can even shut down the banking hall. You send staff away.
You don't need it.
You don't need it. The bank manager can do his business on a golf course with his mobile phone to be told what is the latest treasury bill issue, what is its yield. Okay, let us take in for 20 billion shillings. There is no overhead to run it. All you are doing is you're collecting money from taxpayers and giving it to banks. That's why they're making profit. It's a totally disproportionate phenomenon of the growth of health in the financial sector and the crisis and virtual collapse of the rest of the economy. That's where we are.
And how do you believe you would solve that crisis?
The first thing that has to be done is government. I think it is criminal to continuously live beyond your means, particularly if you are passing that date to the next generation. That your generation will not suffer the consequences of you living beyond your means. Government must rein in its excesses. There are a number of excesses that can be reined in very quickly. Today, even in these difficult times, you see senior government officers going around with massive motorcades, with security escorts. The Prados have become like Beatles used to be in the 60s. Everywhere there's a Prado escorting a government officer or with a siren trying to jump the traffic on the wrong side of the road. All this excess consumption must be reined in. Expensive parastatals which are not living up to even paying for their own survival must be wound up. They are a burden to the taxpayer. The proliferation of political bureaucracy, large. Every minister hires his friends as advisors. The professional officers in every ministry are professional officers who are advisors to the minister. Why we should allow ministers to have a myriad of boys and girls getting a civil service salary, very large money, called advisors, beats me. Most of them have no idea what they are advising about. So cut in this fat. This is the first way to go. Second, tailor our ambitions of investment in infrastructure to our means. We cannot blow it up in one generation and we say we have done an SGR, we have done an expressway, we are doing dual carriageways. You are doing things we cannot afford. And it is not your generation that must do every one of this when you're passing the burden of servicing that day to the next generation. Number 4, there is a monster. The president of this country has said that 2 billion shillings is stolen from the Kenyan taxpayer every day. I don't think it is good enough to talk about it.
I think we've done almost 1 billion by now. It's 8. It's almost 8 M. If you prorate it,
it has grown.
You're doing almost 500 million.
It is criminal that you can mainstream, that you can find acceptable this scale of stealing from the Kenyan public. One of the things that really make me passionate about Kenyan politics is I want to demonstrate that actually Kenya can tame corruption. That actually we can live like any civilized society, which knows that there is no model of economic growth where everybody steals from everybody else and we all become rich. Yeah, and we have to call a bluff on this. And that is, so to me, these are some of the key things that have to be done. Otherwise, it's a nightmare. Whichever way you look at it, the next president of Kenya is going to inherit a very challenging situation.
And that brings me to the question of hope and national psyche.
Right.
We cannot build a country where people are not optimistic.
Right.
People don't have the energy. And on Saturday, I was talking to one of my customers, a parent who has educated all his children, has worked very hard, gotten SACCO loans to take the children to school. And, he was telling me, I feel very disappointed that my kids cannot be able to secure jobs in this country. And we have to accept that not every young person will have the entrepreneurial ability to start a business. And Daktari, the question is, how do we reignite hope and optimism in a country that is so low on it today?
That's an extremely important question you're asking. Last week, I addressed the annual meeting of the National Dialogue, Democracy and Dialogue Conference at Hilton. And I told my audience that the only product that democracy markets is hope. You go to the polling station to vote for a person who gives you more hope than others.
True.
And democracy is founded on hope. They believe that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. I gave an example of the Weimar Republic in Germany during the Depression. People were angry with the democracy because they felt the children were going to be poorer than themselves. And they voted to abandon democracy. And more than 60% of all the European democracies in the 1930s collapsed because of the Depression. If we cannot make the public believe that in perpetuity our children will have better lives than ourselves. The foundation of democracy is very shaky. Now, there are parts of this country, including much of Western Kenya where I come from, where for 3 generations, children are poorer than their parents.
Oh.
And they're staring down the barrel that their own grandchildren will be much poorer than themselves. That is the breeding ground of dissent and disruption to democracy. People do not have terms of engagement. And what we have as a state, believers in democracy must resuscitate hope. And how do you do that? You have to demonstrate that you have an action recovery agenda for the country, which genuinely reignites hope for the hopeless. That you appear to be on course, not to throw money at young people and tell them be entrepreneurs and create jobs. That's nonsense. The main sustainable livelihood for young people is jobs, employment.
Kazi.
It's not some helicopter money to tell them they're now going to be entrepreneurs. There will be some entrepreneurs, but the mainstream responsibility of the state is create conditions for the creation of sustainable jobs. That is the direction we have to go. Okay. It includes what confidence you can build in the domestic investor, how much you can reduce government competing with the investor in the money markets locally, but how comfort you can create for the foreign investor that this is a country where they can come and make a profit legitimately without too much gray zones of corruption and threats and blackmail. And that is part of the agenda that I carry for this country.
Oh, that will give, you'll be able to give people a space to create wealth on the island.
Yes.
Now, I want to take you back to something you mentioned about agriculture. And I think it's a conversation that for the longest time, we've tried to stay away from it. The fact that we become a warehouse economy, an import economy, not importer. For the first time, when you know, back then, we used to say that agriculture is the backbone of this country. Today, it's not even the stomach, it's not the tummy, it's not part of it. Now, in a free economy that we are seeing, the borders are being opened. Products are coming in from Uganda, coming in from Tanzania. Is it that we are not competitive in agriculture? And how would you fix that?
There are a number of things about this. Kenya's agricultural competitiveness, particularly in food crop production, has been in decline relative to its neighbors. Okay. That's one fact. There's a second and even more important fact. I have had the privilege to visit 119 countries around the world. And in most of these places, I've been asking myself why they have done better than us. What is it they do that makes them do better than us? If they are mediocre, if they're worse than us, what traits do I see there that represent failure? There's two things that are principal to me. The first one, there is no country which has grown agriculture without a clear policy of government subsidy. Agriculture has to be nurtured by government until it reaches a certain growth before it can walk on its own. The second thing is development can never come by accident.
Oh, okay.
You must have passion and consistent single-mindedness driving public policy and public investment to make development happen. That goes for manufacturing, it goes for services, and it equally goes for agriculture. In Kenya, the Ministry of Agriculture was created around Kabete in the 1920s. Veterinary labs. Its purpose, find ways of subsidizing white settlers so that they can be encouraged to come and invest in Kenya's agriculture, raise money to be taxed to pay for the railway that had been built. Throughout the colonial period, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock was a ministry to subsidize and protect white farmers.
Okay.
In my youth, we could not sell produce in the market if it threatened the produce of white settlers. A maize cob, you are to remove the seeds at the bottom and at the top and only sell the ones in the middle. Deliberately meant to keep low the quantity of maize you put into the market. Okay. At independence, the one ministry we guaranteed the party colonies that it will remain under white control was agriculture, under Magenzi. And what did they do? They did two things. First of all, manufacture a large-scale African agricultural bourgeoisie, who is preferably also politicians. They knew settlers with hundreds of acres. And the second thing, retain policies that subsidize the rich against the poor. Up to today, the Ministry of Agriculture is a ministry for large-scale farmers. I'll give you an example. If you register with the government as a large-scale farmer, you buy fertilizer and you buy seed at below market prices. If you are a small-scale farmer, if you are lucky, you go to government stores, you buy at a certain price. Otherwise, you go to the shops, you buy higher price and often adulterated seed and fertilizer. So the ministry that still subsidizes the rich cannot be a solution to the problems of the poor.
Okay.
The first step of the dealing with agriculture, particularly primary production, is to know the importance of selective subsidy. But do it, because we have devolved agriculture, it must be done in conjunction with the county governments about targeted subvention interventions that reduce the cost of production, farm gate prices, and make Kenyan agricultural produce competitive again.
But in looking at that history, Dr. and I really appreciate the insight you're giving us. When you look at a country like Zimbabwe, and they revisited the issue of agriculture, the issues of land allocation, the people with the big tracts of land. And there is a fear that that direction never takes a good path for the peace of the country. How do you think you would address it differently?
Oh, I have not advocated land grabs. I only advocated policies that are not just good for the rich farmer, but are first and foremost good for the small-scale farmer, who is the largest producer, but who buys inputs at a higher price, has poorer storage capacity, and loses a lot of their produce because of middlemen. There are so many problems associated with a small-scale producer. I am not advocating this as a Zimbabwean solution. In fact, Zimbabwe, what Mugabe did is an example of what not to do. So I'm not asking to model them. I'm not in that way justifying the land grab that was preferred the political elite to become the land elite at independence. But I'm just saying that as the status quo is, the very least we can do is to redefine agricultural policy to focus the small-scale producer as the primary target of public service.
And how different is that conversation from the conversation of bottom-up or helicopter money?
Okay, there are two things about bottom-up and helicopter money. First of all, bottom-up is not a policy. It's just a practice. And bottom-up internationally gained fame from the government of Thaksin Shinawatra, the Prime Minister of Thailand, after the Asian financial crisis of 1997, when he put money into farmers' cooperatives to give cheap credit to primary producers, and then it unlocked profits for traders who then became rebuild their businesses. In Kenya, it happened under Mwai Kibaki. In our first 2 weeks as cabinet under Mwai Kibaki, we put a lot of public money to buy back KCC from Moi and his friends who had bought it for a song. And the main purpose of buying back KCC was to have an expanded guaranteed minimum price for farmers, for dairy producers, as a way of putting money into the pockets in a sustainable way. You're not throwing money at people. Helicopter money is impossible in a poor economy. This country is begging for money, borrowing money from banks to pay salaries. Where will it get money to directly give free money to you know, it is a model that is impossible. It's a dream. It's an illusion. What happens is this: primary producers be the target of public policy. You can see it has something about bottom up, but it is not a bottom up model or something. It's just a reality that the best way to rebuild enterprise after collapse is not to throw money at the rich, but to create conditions where incomes and livelihoods are built at the base, and they will trigger upwards movement. That's the essence of it. It's a standard social democratic model of doing things.
But there is the pertinent question of, must politicians disagree and fight about something? And I'm coming to the question of, are there ideals, are there ambitions and aspirations which as a country we would want to see that all the presidential hopefuls in the country agree on, and we don't fight about them, that we agree that when it comes to issue A, this is the way forward. Issue B, this is the way forward. So that we sort of, as the population, as the voters, we are confident that our leaders are completely in touch with our fundamental issues. Because it looks like, Kenyan politics is all about, competition, cutthroat competition. I have to kill you for me to have my way. For me to have, you have to lose. Are there issues that you as politicians feel that now you must come to a point of saying, we agree on these fundamental issues. Whoever becomes president of this country, they must first and foremost follow these paths?
In many emerging economies, there are certain policy areas which are ring-fenced as national agenda. And whoever wants to become president demonstrates that they are better than the others because they understand that national agenda better than others, or they have an idea of how to implement their great national agenda better than others. There are some countries like Sri Lanka. Let's take Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been at war with itself for 50 years. But it had one of the healthiest health sectors and education sectors in the developing world. Because all the combatants ring-fenced health and education and says, this is not contested territory. We have core principles and agreement about where this should go. Nobody, no struggle should disrupt this. We were on the way of doing that in Kenya when we established the National Social and Economic Council, and we developed National Agenda 2030.
That was the Vision 2030.
If you protected and nurtured the National Economic and Social Council, and you remained true to your promise to protect Agenda 2030, competition will not be about where to take Kenya, but how to take it to 2030.
Everyone will be focused on 2030.
Yes, the contest today will be, can I trust KITUYI or Ruto
to get us
as
to
a better
2030?
person to get me to what we aspire to as a nation in Agenda 2030? In light of the reversals that we've had under COVID, and the declining international terms of payment, and a massive collapse of our export economy, and so on. So say, I am better than the other because I can do the following things to get the reality we promised ourselves in Vision 2030. But what has happened? We have scuttled the National Economic and Social Council. And
Everyone comes with their own agenda.
we have removed that as part of the national conversation. There's no National Social and Economic Council anymore. And then we have abandoned Vision 2030. So we are basically flying without a compass. I hope if I become president of Kenya, I'll reignite the creation of a National Economic and Social Council and get it written into the Constitution. So that it is not at the discretion of any government to disrupt what sets our medium and longer term national agenda, to which politicians are invited to talk about how they will implement best, not coming up with hairy stories about miracle economics that they will do to the country.
While there, how do you do that? The middle class in this country is significant to the economy of the country.
Yes.
But doesn't seem engaged with the national discourse. What if you were to talk to the middle class, if we put all of them on Zoom because they cannot fit in a room, in any particular room in the country, wanna be talk. If you had, and you are sure you had full audience with the middle class of this country, what would you tell them?
A number of things, and I've been telling some of them. I've done Zoom meetings with the Young Presidents Association twice. I've done Zoom meetings with members of the Asian Foundation, with Rotary Clubs, Lions Club, and others, and professional associations, LSK. I've done a meeting with KEPSA. I have a certain message. The Kenyan middle class is not a class unto itself. If it was a class unto itself, if it had class consciousness, it will know that it is the largest taxpayer in Kenya. And it should never pay an expensive tax unconditionally. To speak collectively, we say, we care for what kind of country we live in. So we must care for how our tax is spent. The middle class in Kenya should be in the front line of setting the menu of what kind of leader do we need. If you look in all developed democracies, the major media houses do major editorial to declare we are going to support a certain candidate for president. And these are the reasons we're supporting that candidate. It's always self-interest that we believe these are the sectors of the economy that need recovery. These are the levers of policy that will be good for the economy. And we believe this candidate is the right one. Well, we don't have to get the middle class in Kenya starting to declare we support this one against that one. But they are too disengaged. They are sitting in their private members' clubs complaining that tension is building and things are not looking good. They are turning their monies into dollar holdings because of fear of what might happen to their shilling. And then after elections, they come back and start complaining, the government is letting us down, or these people we put into power are bad. They didn't put them in power. They are passengers in their politics. The middle class has a responsibility to set out the score, the marking scheme against which we choose which kind of persons are deserving to be our leaders. But if they just sit back to offer loyalty by putting little money bets on different candidates, and they think that is how to build a good country, they're a major letdown. And they're abdicating from a historical responsibility, particularly at a critical transition moment when the economy is doing badly, when COVID is refusing to go away, when ethnic tensions is being stalked again by some irrelevant, irresponsible political talk by some politicians. This is the moment when the middle class and their media houses should start defining the values that should be at the core of our national contests.
But the question is also on the middle class, before I take you back to agriculture and also corruption. On the middle class, do you, I mean, this is a class that is comfortable. When we're talking about going to the streets, they're the guys who don't want to leave Kilimani and go and drive in the streets or and go and demonstrate or picket. They're the people who feel comfortable in their own space. When we talk about the economy, for them, like, we're good. I can pay my rent. I can, guys, don't cause a lot of trouble. Then, and the middle class continues to expand in Kenya. If you look at it, okay, we might be amorphous about what a middle class is, but you realize that the people who don't want to go to a disruption or a revolution, they can continue to grow. We only rant on Twitter or make noise on Twitter. But on the ground, it's only in Kibra. That's when you're seeing guys coming out from to demonstrate, or Madare. In these other regions that we are in, there seems to be zero yearning for change. These are guys who don't vote. These are guys who don't engage themselves in policy. Where's the turnaround then? How do you engage this?
I'm not advocating a revolution. A revolution is too costly, and there's no evidence that it has produced any good. Where we are, we have to set ourselves tasks that are tenable. How can we reverse the balance of trade between Kenya and its neighbors again? At a time when international trade is disrupted massively because of growing economic nationalism in the industrialized countries and the Cold War between the US and China. Our main market for the coming period is going to be around Africa. So we have to start saying, how can I make made in Kenya competitive in the regional market again? The middle class can give the main ideas around which we can progress this conversation. Similarly, our middle class has to become a bit more nationalist. I invested so much effort in helping open up Tanzania and Uganda market for Kenyan producers. When they now ship out and produce from those countries to service the Kenyan market, it's like the ones who have made a profit exporting out of Kenya, and they go and invest their profits in real estate in Leicester and Norwich in England. There are very many of those. Now, this is where the call for nationalism becomes important. Look at India. India has people who are third, fourth, fifth generation non-Indians. They live abroad. They were produced by grandparents who had migrated from India. But their linkage with India is still there. They make a profit, they invest in India. This net capital flow towards India from people who will never live in India again, but they associate with that country. There has to be a certain level of patriotism in the Kenyan national bourgeoisie also, that when we help them build fortunes, partly because of trans-border trade and other opportunities that we create, they have to express appreciation by investing to build enterprise in Kenya. They have to help with the conversation about how to nurture enterprise Kenya, how to unlock the potential of young Kenyan talents. So this is the conversation that the middle class can bring to the politics. But you say they are demobilized.
How do you rebuild the trust between the government and the people, for the people to feel that the government is existing to serve them? And I'll take an example of the people.
Vote those who do not seem to know how to build that trust out of power. and vote into power those who give impression that they believe in the importance of nurturing trust, bring back hope, and bring back a sense of mutual respect and engagement. That should be part of the political context conversation.
Let's take a look at, in appreciation of your, grasp of the Kenyan history, the political history. We've had 4 presidents before, and you want to be the 5th one. And it is said that every great man must learn from the mistakes of others. When you look back at the presidents that we've had as a country, at the time when they were leading the country, what mistakes outstand for each and every president that we have had? And out of the 4 presidents that we've had, who would you pick as your best role model? Who would you go to for mentorship? We know that some of them are late, but who, if all of them were alive, who would you go back to for mentorship as the next president of Kenya?
Okay, so to the first question, the first President Kenyatta had a lot of goodwill and national embrace as the tar of Kenya. But he threw a lot of that goodwill overboard with the assassination of Tom Mboya, with the arbitral way he dealt with opposition already from the 60s, with a very unequal distribution of the 3 million acres settlement program from the White Highlands after independence, and with a very unequal distribution of opportunities and investments, which have characterized subsequent history of the country. The second president, Moi, many have said that Moi already was the largest landowner when he became president. That already more than Kenyatta. He had a singular attention to this. He did exaggerate also a perpetuation of what had started under Kenyatta. The unequal allocation of public opportunities. But we also saw a faster rise in cronyism and then a very, very systematic destruction of Kikuyu business by government, particularly the assault on the private financial sector in the 1980s. Just killing places like Jimba Credit and others, but purely politically driven destruction of opportunity. Either we like you or we finish you. Under Kibaki, the main weakness I saw in the Kibaki years politically was being derailed from a very, very good program because of political brinkmanship. As cabinet minister, one of the things I regret most, I regret 2 major things. One, when President Kibaki suffered a stroke early in his term, already in February 2003, a group of people near him went almost berserk in looking for early opportunity to become rich. And you could just start saying Anglo-leasing, walking into government, our voice on corruption being muffled, impunity rising again, while the president was, was in a bad place in terms of health. But there was a second thing, the brinkmanship that led government to push for a referendum on the constitution it did not need. There was not sufficient reason in the year 2005 for government to push for going to a referendum about the constitution. The issues of difference were so minor. There was much more stuff that we had to overcome after 2007 elections in creating the 2010 constitution than the divide between bananas and oranges in the 2005 referendum, which I think broke the spine and the legitimacy of a very good government. But just impunity that we are government, you cannot defeat us. So that hubris was the weakest point of the Kibaki years. The Uhuru years, first of all, there was a very, very unequal distribution of public positions, particularly ministries. After the Uhuru Ruto the team came into power in 2013. But more importantly, just the borrowing and spending binge of the last 8 years is the worst heritage that we'll have from this government. An appetite to live way beyond our means. The boys are happy, but the country is bleeding. And this is the biggest challenge that will be bequeathed to the next government. If I had to choose who is my role model, Mwai Kibaki. He had his weaknesses. The biggest weakness was his health. And the person around him who abused office when he was he was in a low place health-wise.
Who is the person around him?
People, a number of people.
All right.
Yeah. But what I liked, like I can give you an example. In the first cabinet meeting of the Kibaki government, the president presented to us, his ministers, a proposal which we approved, that cabinet resolves to donate Gabarnet Gardens to Daniel Arap Moi.
Hello?
Until Moi left power, he was staying in the former residence of the deputy governor of Kenya, which was the vice president's residence after independence. He never privatized Gabarnet Gardens. It remained a government house up to the end. But
the same one down here?
The one across the road from you.
Okay.
And what Kibaki did is to ask cabinet to approve that we donate that property to Moi as a gift to him.
Okay.
And increase the pension for our retiring president. To me, it is also the wisdom of a far-sighted leader that we have had our bitternesses about Moi. We've had our disagreements with Moi. But the institution of Kenya requires a comfort and guarantee of those living power, regardless of what they did and how they did it, in order to keep the calm and the stability in transition. To me, Kibaki was creating the institution of former president, which we had never had in Kenya. And he was creating it such that a sitting president will be comfortable with whatever I have done. I will have a chance to walk into sunset with dignity and respect.
They should never worry about clinging into
They
power.
should not worry about people punishing them individually and their families because they're out of power. And there's a lot of temptation for that in certain activist circles. But I think the statement by Kibaki is the stature of a statesman. You may have discomfort about some of the things the president has done. But the institution of Kenya and the continuity of changing office holders requires that every retiring president has a certain guarantee of personal protection and dignity after they leave office.
Good.
So those are some of the. But the main thing I liked about the Kibaki years is that we were sailing with a compass. We had a clear destination.
We knew we were going somewhere. We
wanted to go somewhere.
Okay.
We crafted the National Economic and Social Council. We crafted Agenda 2030. We set up the medium-term development program. So we had a clear direction of beaconing where we want to go. We could measure our progress and assess what are the pitfalls on the way. But when you remove the compass, you are sailing without a destination, and you can't get lost, and you can't get there.
You can now, having picked your local mentor, you've traveled to 110 countries, and we would want to know out there, who are your role model presidents and countries? What kind of a country would you want to create for us, taking a picture of another country out there? Do you want to make it a Somalia, a South Sudan, a Singapore? What kind of...
I've been to 119 countries.
119,
and the best country I like to live in is Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah.
100 and?
I've been to 119 countries.
But the best place you want to live
I like to live is Kenya.
Okay.
It's so full of good people. It's so full of good opportunities. And it will take very little beyond clear political decisions to unlock the potential and the energy of Kenya. There are people who have done things that I liked. I like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore in his singular obsession with success, building out of adversity, the way Kagame has been trying to do in Rwanda. But they have unique, challenging circumstances, small population, small island, hermit in Rwanda. You wish more space, you wish more maritime access and things. I have seen leaders whose biggest asset is that they are ready to accept, as Winston Churchill once said, that I've never gotten constipated by eating my words. I can make a mistake and I'm man enough to say sorry. I find that act of humility very, very good and very, very instructive about a leader who's ready to say, I took a wrong turn. I want to take a better turn. But third, the main thing that inspires me is the sense that those who succeed do not succeed by accident. They look at their circumstances and marshal resources to succeed. Two examples from Asia are instructive to me. In 1994, when Vietnam had just ended the pogroms and the crisis that had bedeviled it, the total export of manufactured goods from Vietnam to the rest of the world was $1.24 billion US. Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa's manufactured export was worth 60 billion. 1.24 to 60 billion. In the year 2015, Africa had increased 50% to 90 billion value-added exports. Vietnam had moved from 1.24 to $125 billion exports. It was not just a miracle. It was aligning resources, opportunity, educational system, and innovation. Similarly, Cambodia was destroyed by the Pol Pot dictatorship. 1989, the country had less than 1,000 university graduates because the state had been slaughtering and driving into exile everybody with an education. Today, Cambodia exports 10 million sports bicycles to the European Union. Manufacturing. Kenya still imports those old-fashioned bicycles from India. So I'm inspired by people who, in a very, very singular way, are driven by the desire to succeed. And I always say, he who has no destination cannot get lost.
Because where you're not going anywhere.
You're just like a chicken. The sun rises, you strut around. The sun sets, you come back home. You're not lost. Yeah, but a purposeful definition of a direction and destination allows you to assess your progress. What is holding us back? What additional resources do we need? What can we prioritize? What behavior can we avoid? What are best practices to inform the journey to our destination? This should be the conversation of a developmental state. Not what guarantee do you give me about percentages of ministers in your government for my tribe. This is not the conversation about how to grow Kenya.
All right. And there's something you mentioned across the history of the presidents, corruption.
Yes.
And you've spoken about it so passionately. And it has become a campaign agenda that everyone comes and says, I'll slay corruption, I'll fight corruption. Uhuru Kenyatta once told us that his legacy will be fighting corruption. He also came and confessed that he loses 2 billion daily. Do you think you have the grit to fight this corruption, to slay this monster? And how are you going to do it?
I will look you straight in the eye and say, I've not met a single politician in Kenya who is seeking high office today who shares my passion for the war against corruption.
Okay.
It is cerebral. I think it is such a blot on the character of Kenya. And it's such a shame because it costs us so much. When I see children dying because there's no medicine in hospitals and because money has been stolen by people from the system, I feel parental outrage. And the thing is, I have told you, I have met the Kenyan community. I was a fellow at Brookings in Washington. During that, I was meeting a lot of the Kenyans working with the World Bank, IMF. They are brilliant Kenyans out there. I've lived in Europe, 7 years in Norway, 7.5 years in Switzerland. I get to meet so many brilliant Kenyans doing things for the rest of the world. And all the time I say, this human capital, how can I attract it to do what it is doing in the country called Kenya? A lot of them will be glad to come as a contribution. A lot of them will be ready to take a cut in their incomes, the part of the monuments, if they were appreciated. If someone gave them a sense that Kenya appreciates their value and Kenya wants to grow their talent. And I don't think you can show that appreciation if you are drowning in the pursuit of limited little bribes. So to me, you either are ready to fight corruption or enterprise Kenya is not possible.
How do you fight it? Is a question.
Oh yes, you can. It is very easy.
Okay.
First of all, I think we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God it doesn't mean we accept that we'll continue sinning forever. We have to say those who are ready to repent and change their ways, you belong to the future of our country. What that means is that we have to go through 2 tracks. One track is to say there's certain level of corruption of the past that we will put behind us. We should not
amnesty.
We should not. Yes, there has to be certain amnesty. We should not be bent under the burden of forensic investigation about who did what in the past. But there is also another window. Truth and reconciliation requires truth before reconciliation. If you have massively grabbed things, the truth is you have to surrender some that belongs to Caesar before you say, now I want reconciliation with the rest. And the third is you have to escalate the cost.
So you're
of
revisiting
corruption.
the history.
There's certain history we cannot just wish away. Recent history that is still active in the courts. You cannot just forgive crimes of one NYS, KEMSA. You know, these ones you cannot just say, okay, let's forget the past. That's not the past, that is the present. And in the present, part of building peace, sustainable peace, is confession, reparation, and reconciliation. And then we must make new corruption so expensive that no rational person will want to walk there. How do you make that? You demonstrate every new corrupt case, you give it the ultimate punishment. We have to work with the courts. By the prosecution, the state must show a passion that we do not let corruption cases linger for 5-10 years till the culprits have died peacefully in their retirement homes. No. We have to deal with that very consistently. So I am looking at a bridging period where we have to have a public dialogue about what's the best way to deal with existing corruption cases. How do we offload the burden of forensic investigation that can look like headhunting and witch hunting? But in this passage, how can we make sure that everything that happens from now on is as clear and as clean and transparent as Caesar's wife?
So you're banking on punishment as a
punishment
as a
is
strategy
one of the
corruption.
routes to go. But the political culture that celebrates theft has to be tackled by us collectively. The media, the intelligentsia, the political players, all of us have to say, the days when you were a hero because you demonstrated affluence that you have not and are over.
Another thing, sir, about you mentioned that the problem that we have as a country is pegged on, opportunities for young people to be productive. And I mean, this is also another campaign agenda that every presidential candidate comes in says, even in BBI it was there, that the youth will get jobs, will get memorata, I don't know, whatever that was. Tax breaks and all these other things. But the reality of walking the tightrope, you've mentioned that would be your turnaround economic strategy, ensuring that more people are able to be productive in an economy, opportunities for jobs. How realistic is this, and how are you going to make this happen?
Okay, there are 2 different components to this question that have to be part of the answer. The youth cannot be like items in a supermarket that we are going to buy politically and put in the right place. To me, the youth represent some of our most exposed and most intelligent component of the population. And therefore, grafting solutions to youth unemployment and youth opportunity has to be done not for youth, but with youth.
Nothing for us without us.
Yeah, nothing for us without us. That's very important. My generation does not have all the answers about how to move this country forward. Some of us, because of intellectual exposure and so on, may have ideas that have to be part of that solution. The way I've been saying, I'm crafting a political party whose policy platform is like a canvas. We invite youth. We want you to co-own this agenda. On this canvas, KITUYI is writing what he thinks that should be the future of Kenya. But we invite you also to come and write your own dreams. You are a social media generation. We know that you can like us and tomorrow you can unlike us.
Very quickly.
And the only way we can, when you befriend us, that you can...
We can also prefer not to like or unlike.
Sometimes you can friend and then be unfriend. But what we do is, if you write your own aspirations on our platform, on this canvas, you work with us because you co-own this process. And you can say, I will unlike you if my agenda disappears from your menu. I think this is the surest way of arresting and detaining the attention of youth, that you genuinely make them co-own the journey. They co-author the solutions. They are not spectators to the solutions. But then there's another thing also. with the level of investment necessary to turn around the Kenyan economy and create sustainable jobs, or as you like calling it, sustainable money in the pocket.
Pesa mfukoni.
It is not possible to do those things without triggering a very substantial inflow of foreign direct investment in the Kenyan economy. So I look at a situation where whoever has the best way to market Kenya as a destination for investors is critically important for turning around the opportunities in the marketplace of Kenya.
We cannot talk about the youth without talking about the education system that they go through. And I would like to pick your mind on the current status in the education sector. What are you satisfied with it? Are there gaps when you talk about CBC? What are your thoughts about CBC? Is it pragmatic? Is it sustainable? What's the way forward? What do you think about it?
The Kenya government is in the middle of introducing very, very, very far-reaching reforms of the education system. And they are doing this in a country with a very well-educated population, that many of the parents are able to look and Google and see what are the gives and takes of this new system. There is a major problem. There has not been sufficient public dialogue on not only the benefits, but the viability and the transition to a CBC. I don't think it's good enough for government ministers to say, this is going to happen because we have decided it's going to happen. Kenya is not a dictatorship. That it's not your children, it's our children.
So CBC is not going anywhere.
I don't know if it's going anywhere, but I think the conversation should be, we
change.
come to this table with clean hearts, clean hands. We don't think we know everything. We have some important ideas which I think will be good for the country. We want to invite you to dialogue with us about what is the best thing and what's the best way of implementing what is good for the country. But brinkmanship is not part of our democratic engagement. So that even something that is good can be sold short because of the merchants. So this, I think, is the immediate problem bedeviling the education sector. Similarly, it is being recovered now, but it has been very clumsy when government falls out with the leadership of a trade union movement to try to destroy a trade union movement because you don't like those who are in the leadership. That's the impetuity of little boys fighting when looking after cows. It is not the behavior of leaders of government. We have lost a lot of energy and wasted political capital on fighting Sosioni. It was not a necessary war, not to the level of resources and disruptions that came with it, and we see that in a lot of other areas. But the reality is, at a critical time like this, dialogue on a radical transformation of the education system required to be more measured and more inclusive, and it's not always coming through from the little I hear on the value and the implementation of CBC. Yeah.
What is your take on free education? In the rush to give free education, do you feel like we are balancing with the quality of that education?
One of the main achievements of Mwai Kibaki is to expand the reach of free education. But free education, like free health, is aspirational. You never totally have sufficient resources to optimally give free education or free health services as much as you might desire to do. So what happens is trimming other expenditures to increase the quality services provided for education will be important in gaining the benefit of free education. But if we are stalling in resourcing of education, you see user charges, which is fees by another name, starts coming back to pay for what the government which promised free education cannot afford to pay. And in the medium term, looking at the state of Kenya's economy and the kind of burdens that I am going to inherit when I become president, I think we will struggle with transiting to being able to afford properly free education as promised earlier. Yeah, the resourcing is not sufficient there right now.
So you'll walk away from that.
Yes.
All right. I would like to take in a few questions from the one that you're watching us this morning. But I also want to pick up. There's someone who has said, there's another one question is, judiciary is independent. How do you ensure that they deliver on anti-corruption?
I have been saying it is not possible to fight corruption without the concurrence and the participation of the judiciary. I have addressed a meeting of senior members of the judicial profession, where I said that Kenya's judiciary speaks more often with a united voice when defending a judicial officer than when defending justice. And that has been a problem. Anytime a judge faces an issue, see collective action by the judiciary. But when one of their own blatantly involves in corruption, the voices are much more muted. That's not a very good signal. Lady Chief Justice Martha Koome is a long-term friend for me, and I believe that she has the capacity and the personal disposition to put more attention to system-wide commitment to fighting corruption. The most important thing is there has to be a back channel between the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive in a democracy. So a backstage conversation between the speaker, the president of the courts, of the Supreme Court, and the president of the Republic can sort out things about how can we lock our steps in the war against corruption. That arrests, prosecutions, and convictions are carried out in speedy time. I mean, to places where, like if you go to Indonesia or Malaysia, drug cases, you are found with drugs at the airport, you are arrested and charged at the airport, and the conviction or otherwise is complete in the next 3 hours.
You have been charged already.
Many times ending in conviction, the execution. Yeah, there's a lot of young African couriers who get slaughtered in the courts there.
Within the day?
Within the day, because they are carrying drugs. And there is against it. In many countries, even in China, corruption cases are fast-tracked. From being charged to conviction or freeing is maximum months, never years. So if we can have a more consistent roadmap of cooperation between the executive and the judiciary, we'll have faster justice, which is important for demonstrating justice. But it will help to fasten demonstration that crime does not pay, and particularly corruption does not pay.
It doesn't pay, it actually punishes. Another thing is, another question here, the issue of, everyone is talking about economics. You know, about the economy, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do that. But we never talk about the cost of politics. And it comes in two ways. The cost of politics, first of all, the environment of politics, how it is structured, it affects the psyche of the country. And secondly, representation. Talk about the weight bill that we get from the political space. So we're having a conversation around the economy. All of us are targeting there. But then again, the beneficiaries at the end of the day will be the politicians. The cost of politics, the environment, nobody talks about the environment, nobody talks about the representation. What's your feeling on that?
When I first was elected to Parliament, the monthly salary takeaway of a member of Parliament of Kenya was 19,000 shillings.
Which year was that?
1992.
Wow.
When Parliamentary Service Commission was given power and energized to work on member stamps, it has behaved. In British, in English terms, they call it the prerogative of a harlot. You know, privilege without responsibility. That all of a sudden you see mushrooming of allowances and personal benefits and salaries and pensions in total disproportion with the quality, the ability of the economy growing. Such that we have a situation now where the takeaway benefits of an MCA are more than 20, 30 times the salary of an MP 1992. When I was hearing people saying BBI is good because it will give us more constituencies, I was seeing a collective madness in a country which does not know what times it's living through. To me, one of the most scary things about BBI, was the creation of 70 new constituencies and the attendant cost to the taxpayer. Where we are today, Kenya needs to be cutting back on costs, not creating new costs. But I can also put it to you this way, for free. Whichever way you look at it, the next government is going to get into negotiations with parliament and county governments on reducing the salary bill. There's no way we can escape it. All these massive pensions that governors are trying to promise themselves and the MCAs
And I saw that. What ridiculous.
They are giving democracy a bad name. And I think we are going to go into a phase where the ease with which MPs can load onto themselves more benefits, or the Council of Governors is a thing of the past. And we have to reverse some of the excesses that have come because of this kind of laissez-faire way of handling public finances. It's not sustainable. But then there's another cost about politics. The Kenyan consumer of politics has escalated the cost of doing politics. Every church in your village wants you to come and buy them tiles to put on their floors and chairs for their church. Every person with a relative in the hospital because of COVID wants you to come and pay the hospital bill. Every other person is saying universities have reopened, but my children don't have money to go in. They assume that to be a good politician, to be a good presidential candidate, you must cover this personal costs of everybody.
You must chuck money.
The only way you can answer those expectations is to steal money. There is no one, however clever you are, who will have their own personal income able to satisfy the whole social bill of a country. Now, if you use money from special interest groups that way to buy political power, you are sentenced to slavery to those sources of monies because they must be reimbursed. So the consumer is building the cycle of corrupting politicians, which makes them vulnerable to dirty money, which makes them not fight corruption. So this cyclic in a country, that cycle can be broken by the electorate. Saying, let us choose persons because they're the right people, not because they have the shortest pipeline between source of dark money and the consumer, whether it's a church or a community or family or school, or all this proliferation of harambes.
Hapo ndio pesa upotelea.
That's
That's what makes politics expensive.
Yes.
So when you're coming in, you want to recover fast. Uniacha kwanza nikule kidogo, nipumue. Get the energy. Wanasemanga niache nilambe glucose. The marathon of politics. Okay. I don't know if you have any question, Eric, before we also transition.
You can go first.
All right. Let's come back to the politics the way it's shaping back now before I get, because I'm seeing most of the questions that are being asked here about youth employment. You've already tackled them. About the economy, I think you've already tackled agriculture. You've tackled it. Millions of unemployed Kenyans. You've tackled that. Corruption. Everyone is crying about corruption. Right. So there are many comments and many questions. So I would just like to ensure that we have a theme around it. So
but let me talk something to youth, because it appears to me quite a significant segment of your audience are youth.
Yes.
And I think it's important that I say this to our youth. You are seeing all manner of social categories demanding audiences with the politicians. But youth are the largest constituency in Kenya. And they are the owners of the burdens and the fruits of the next few years. As a category, they should demand audiences with all political players seeking to be president of this country. To say, how do you engage us? What is in your campaign for us? What do you want to do with youth-specific questions? I've had a number of meetings or town halls with youth from 3 counties. They are very brilliant, but they are not initiating that conversation. They are waiting to be invited to that conversation. Those who fear your pungent lines are not going to invite you to humiliate them by exposing them. But I think it's increasingly necessary that youth organize a way to demand that those who want to become president in their name are accountable to them and can ask and be asked questions about their agenda for youth.
And that comes to the electorate literacy. Kumbe it's different to go to school for education and also to be an educated citizen. I mean, the people who vote in, the people you complain about. I remember you are among those who are singing Komera Komera, Uhuru Tano Tena. You sang the song. It was a nice song. But I mean, the people who vote are the people who complain. the same people. The young people that we have today, like you were saying, are the bigger voting bloc. Do you feel we need more education on voting or electorate civic education?
Well, civic education has a value. Just reminding people about what are the purposes and the processes for choosing good leadership.
Okay.
But there is a national conversation that has to be had about the difference between what Kenyans need and what Kenyans want. You know, if you listen to their assessments about complaints about government, it's informed by what they think they need.
Okay.
But if you look at their voter preferences, it is informed by what they want. What they want is what makes them feel comfortable. What makes them feel comfortable is not necessarily the agenda for national renewal that is carried by the candidates. So closing the gap between their preferences for as voters and their preferences as citizens is very, very important. Yeah. And that has not always been on the table. Why do you complain when you are the ones who voted these people? Eh? Sasa ukipanda kwekwe huwezi kufuna mpunga.
Lazima ile mbegu umepanda subiri mavuno. Kuna swali hapa kutoka Masi Senewa. Anauliza, how will you hold governors accountable in making sure CIDP is well implemented in county levels? And I think I would want you to also tie it with agriculture, because agriculture is also it's developed. It's devolved. There isn't much the national executive, the national government would do to influence that. And you mentioned that, first of all, you'll work with county governments to ensure that agriculture is more competitive. Maybe you can combine a question with what you had said on agriculture.
You know, the process of developing devolution in Kenya was very arbitrary in some of the things that were recommended, some very unpractical. But some just a power grab between devolved entities and national government. I think it was a good thing that the teachers who are very organized in their trade union resisted the devolution of education. Because it was on the cards, and there were some very, very strong proponents of devolving education. After the experience we have had, I think it was not a very smart idea to devolve health services.
Okay.
Because there are very many places where county governments do not hire professional doctors. They use clinical officers and they call them cheap doctors. So that a lot of the level 4 hospitals are offering professionally a service which is much, much less than they could have been capable of if they had the staffing with the right quality and level of personnel in clinical training. I think going forward, I don't think I can just say that I will reopen the question of what to re-centralize as government. But we must find a modus operandi between national government and devolved government on a number of important areas. I have discussed with some other people that as Minister of Trade, I was very passionate about lowering the cost of moving goods between Kenya and its neighbors. Because we have offensive interests. We were the ones to sell in those territories. We wanted to make it easier. Today, we have introduced something that looks like customs borders between counties.
It's very sad, yeah. Every time you cross a county, it's a bill on it.
We were trying to make it easy for goods to move between Kenya and its neighbors.
Now we
didn't know that we are now going to talk about moving goods between Nyamira and Kisii.
True.
Yeah. So there are so many components which should inform national discourse. Because at the end of the day, the cost of made in Kenya is increased every time you build a little barrier between a production area and a destination market. If you start having too many impediments, the movement of manufactured goods from a place to the international market, all manufacturers will move their production to Mombasa. So that industrial jobs will be lost in the rest of the country because of running away from red tape. So a conversation about how can we industrialize must include how can we harmonize the cesses and the taxation measures. How can we believe that a country grows not because it taxes people more, but because enterprise has the capital and the leeway to invest in creating more jobs and more products.
Okay. Let me represent Fred Nalianya, who is asking a question on the wall on the Facebook page, saying that majority of the youth have millions of ideas, but lack capital. How will Daktari ensure access to credit for the youth without them being denied because of this animal called CRB?
There are 2-3 things. First of all, I don't think that capital is the main engine for youth to grow. I think, like I mentioned, we should create conditions where young and older entrepreneurs can access credit in a sustainable way. But we must, more importantly, create conditions for employment. To me, jobs are more important than capital for most of youth. Having said that, the main thing that is done by governments to make access to capital viable is for government to stop borrowing money locally. When the easy money they are making from government disappears, banks will reinvent their engagement with the population. They will be the source of cheap credit. So long as government is borrowing money dearly domestically, there is no bank that will rationally stop giving money to government and give it to young entrepreneurs. 3, a lot of the ideas that youth have do not have to be implemented by them. We can have business incubation centers where they come and try out at the expense of the state to see whatever can grow, then we can take you out of the greenhouse and go and grow it as enterprise. But there are so many other steps that can be done through business incubation centers. Like I run a very successful program international called Empretech, where we train young men and women and older women, women and youth, on entrepreneurship and enterprise linkages and entrepreneurial culture. And it worked very well. It's working extremely well in Uganda and Brazil. And I was in the process of launching it in Kenya when I left the UN service. But I still think I'll help have it launched in Kenya in the course of the next 1 year. This way, we unlock the potential of our entrepreneurs. They are part of the solution, but they are not the only solution.
Good. Wow. There is a pertinent question these days on the issue of the boy child in the country.
Yeah.
And this is a good question to you because, one, you're a man and you're a father. Now, what do you think went wrong in terms of, we have a lot of young boys in prison as compared to women. We have a lot of young men in drugs and substance abuse. We've seen, very many cases of depression in young men, including suicide cases. The other day, Gerard was giving me statistics of I don't know which county that has recorded suicide after suicide of young men. What is your input to this social crisis?
I cannot pretend ultimate knowledge about the dynamics that are feeding this sad phenomenon. But it is true that mental health issues are becoming almost pandemic level in Kenya. And quite a few of these mental health issues are associated with economic vulnerability. Depression, loneliness, poverty, anxiety. The impact of social media and global television is that everybody is a consumer of what success looks like. You know what the successful have done, what jets they fly. Everybody dreams of what the best basketballers in America are earning. And from dream to grief is a very short distance personally. And so you put yourself under immense pressure that you want to be like those you can never be like. And you do not see the path to it. It causes depression, and the downward cycle of depression is always suicidal temptations. So this is the reality that sometimes unsustainable delusions of possible grandeur, but sometimes the continued challenges of hopelessness. You are pushed to go through education because you believe that you will prosper after that. And you come to the end of the pipeline and you are seeing the exasperation, challenges of not being able to have enough food. I was talking to a youth audience last week who are telling me, you see a lot of us on Facebook and Twitter at 3 a.m. because we do not have the resources to have a wife. So 3 a.m. you are worrying, you are alone at home. And that's the time now you go to Facebook, churning out all manner of opinions. It's a reality that challenging economic times are a feeding ground for depression. and depression is the gateway towards the mental health challenges. I think partly that is the problem.
How do we resolve this problem?
I don't have a silver bullet on resolving this. I think we need a lot more systematic counseling and investment in mental health services. We are not treating it as a health pandemic to be given due attention. So psychiatric attention and health counseling are an important component of growing up. Actually, part of it should be mainstreamed as part of the education system. But I also think that at the end of the day, turning around the economy is part of the solution.
Okay. The better the economy, the better the people. All right. I'm going to pick calls in the next 5 minutes. I'm going to open Bunga for 5 minutes so that we're able to, time kumbe inakimbia. It's already 3 minutes to 9. All right. So 0779-800-010, 0779-800-010. Bunga la mwenye nchi liko wazi. Piga simu 0779-800-010, 0779-800-010. Kwa dakika 5, bazo zinakuja tunachukua maswali mbio. Alikifika pale tu ni maswali unasukuma haraka alafu tuweze kusonga pamoja. Kuna swali pia hapa imekuja kwako kutoka YouTube. Mheshimiwa anaitwa Robert Muoka anauliza, please ask daktari why he wants to take over a country that is so indebted and the first 5 years will be spent trying to turn it around such that in the next election the same will be used against him. Ruben Oleva is also saying this is a good question. I want to also read a few comments on Facebook very quickly. Saying a gentleman here called Wachekeza says, good discussion, Bitok. What steps is MUKHISA making to galvanize his own base for Block Western that is too disintegrated? I think amesema amekuwa kwa ground. Asante. Haya, tusikie Mungwana anasemaje. Jambo, bunge la mwenye nchi.
Bunge la mwenye, good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
I'm very fine. This is Farid Faraj.
Farid Faraj, mambo?
Poa sana.
Haya, zungumza na rais.
Rais mtarajiwa?
Yes, naam.
Orie papa.
Abulai.
Olimulamu. Urinai chezilai sana lakini you have a very long life. Those ideas are very brilliant, but now selling them is now going to be a problem. More so with the Kenyan politics whereby people are being worshipped as gods. I think the best thing you can do, position yourself very well. Get a safe position, execute them under that position. If the next president, who might not be you, will allow you to execute them under their government. Number 2, on the mental health issue, it is not all about finance or any other thing that causes depression or any other thing. These are things. We have a lot. It's a whole topic on its own. There are a lot of issues that are causing depression in a society, more so in this growing economy. We have things like social injustice. When people are not served their justice as they deserve or they think they should be served.
Okay.
Number 2, you find somebody with money and they get into depression, like the doctor in Nakuru, Dr. Gakara. He is a well-off doctor. That is not finance that has caused him. It is all about family things.
Okay.
So it has to be tackled from all ends. Let us not say it from the finance issue.
Depression and impressions that people get from other lifestyles. But I also mentioned the importance of psychiatric services. So my answer is not totally inconsistent with what the gentleman is suggesting. As to the question, the encouragement, the comments that I have a good agenda, but people have to be made to buy it. And I'm partly on this show because I want to reach people like him to say, I want you to own this agenda with me. So you become a salesman of an agenda because you believe in it. So that is a step in the right direction.
Elvis Sutuma says, this man, Dr. MUKHISA KITUYI, is very much able to be the president of Kenya and get us out of this economic challenge we have today. Let us campaign for him. Malonza Lonzi Chege is asking, how can we help MK spread his campaign and message and elect him as the next CEO? Does he have a volunteer team? Is he?
Yes, I think I want to talk to that question. We have established a secretariat in Nairobi, which will soon be making publicly known to those who want to volunteer to go on this journey with us. And part of the work we're trying to do is like part of governance development among younger people. We encourage them to come and take direct charge of political work. In a way that they also get to know the ropes and they prepare themselves to compete for elective position. You can't just be stone throwers on behalf of politicians. Start to learn to be the politicians. I'll be very interested, for example, that apart from just getting volunteers who are part of this journey with us, we get a lot of young people who start having a sense that part of the answer to the national challenge is them competing for elective office and being part of the solution to the problem. Which brings me to the question you asked earlier on. Somebody was saying, but Dr. KITUYI is a good person, but taking over this country will be a very difficult challenge, and it might make him lose the next election. If I can help to stem the decline of my country, put the country back on a path of repair, if I can contribute in making Kenya a good place, I'll be ready to pay the price of not being elected again, but serving a 5-year period which will be remembered for a long time. Nelson Mandela was president for 5 years. They say sometimes that immortality is not, being immortal does not require that you live forever. So if you can have an impact in 5 years that is distinctively important for the country, it's an achievement that you can take home with you and say, I played my part, without fearing about being re-elected because of the tough decisions you'll have to make. In fact, I'm ready for the tough decisions.
Wow, I can see it in the eyes. All right. Alfred Nyakundi says, here is one man that seems to know what is bedeviling Kenya. Is reasoning appeals well to my intellectual faculties. Might this be Kenya's next CEO? The answer to this question is how. All right. Good morning. Bungala Manyanchi.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you?
Fine, thank you. My name is Duncan.
Yes, Duncan.
I'm calling from Nairobi.
Yes.
So say hi to the presidential candidate, first of all.
He can hear you.
And my question is, we recently, the issue of BBI and the question of constitutional amendment as the presidential candidate. What is it going to do to ensure that counties like Mount Kenya and other places in which we are not getting equitable share as per the 2010 constitution are given their fair share? Number two, what is his agenda about the youth? Because we see about the youth in the country, and as a president, when he becomes president, because currently, as we speak, for example, if we talk of youth fund, if you go to that office, you find that 90% of the staff are not youth. Number two, if, for example, you want to take a loan, you are from the university. The security in those offices are too high for the youth, because you are told, for example, if you want a loan, you provide a logbook, for example, title deed.
Okay.
So as a youth, I'm just fresh from the university. Where am I going to get the logbook and become a hero?
Okay, asante.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Asante. Thank you so much for calling in. Jeff Sika says, wish for a day when majority of Kenyans can vote for good leadership and not vote based on emotions and tribe. All right. Thank you, Officer.
The number of questions that gentleman raised are very important questions, but also require a lot of guts for us to deal genuinely with them. I was part of the process in crafting the 2010 Constitution of Kenya. And this sense that Mount Kenya was not being given its fair share has been defined very recently. It was not part of that conversation. Okay. In fact, it was not part of the conversation about BBI at first. It has come very late, even the BBI discourse, because there is a principle that we embraced at Naivasha called affirmative action. Okay. And affirmative action is to say, we can use the statistics of the Kenya Bureau of Statistics to know areas with high infant mortality, areas with maternal health care challenges above national normal, areas of child stunting, areas of low investment in education infrastructure, vulnerability to certain sicknesses like malaria. And we build this into a formula where certain resources are given to these people that others are not getting to help reduce the gap between them and the rest of the country in terms of the appropriation of life. That principle was a national principle. It was not an ethnic principle. So that if you put in Turkana and you put in Busia, it's not because you're giving advantage to Turkanas and the Samia and the Banyala, but you're saying historical circumstances and objective conditions where you operate from are giving you a difficult start in life compared to other citizens. And that the rest of the country can sacrifice a little to bring you closer to them. This principle is not born in Kenya. Let me give you the example of the US. there are states like New York and California which pay a large tax that goes to help poor states, like the southern states, which are so rapidly Republican. And the taxpayers in these richer states are Democrats. But they produce money from their taxes in a way of national affirmative action to cushion the budgets of the poorer states. So a sense that this region is not getting its fair share because we are this number and therefore should get this number of shillings is a convenient conversation if you want to build a political constituency. But it sacrifices some of the glue that is going to keep Kenya together. It's important that if I come from Kiambu, I say, okay, if I got the same shilling with a person from Lamu, I will feel happy that one man, one vote, one shilling. But the reality is the life situation of the person in Lamu requires that me who lives in Kiambu, regardless of my tribe, would think that as a citizen duty, let me reduce the pain and the distance socially in progress that the resident of Lamu has compared to me. So we should not just be consumed by the notion of one man, one shilling in an area. I mean, I come from a very, very large population. I come from the Luya, who are a very, very large population. So as an ethnic politician, I will say Luyas will benefit from one man, one shilling, one vote. But there is a certain conversation we must have as a nation. That we cannot sustain a model of inclusive prosperity if certain areas are left behind because of a paucity of resource endowment, geography, vulnerabilities to other inhibiting matters, and we're just counting one man, one shilling. That conversation is not a total solution. There was a second question he raised about youth. I think I've forgotten some of the bearing of it, but
it was about raising capital, and the gentleman was alluding to the fact that for you to get formal capital from...
You'll allow me to disturb you, Eric, just to pick a mind of a diaspora here who has been on the line for 3 minutes. Good morning. Is it good evening, sir?
Hey, good morning, Bwana Kiongozi Gerald Bitok.
Jambo. How are you, sir?
Mzuri kabisa na
Pole.
habari Daktari MUKHISA KITUYI.
Salama Salmin.
Nashukuru. Mwanzo kila nakupa kongole kwanza kwa ukwasi wako wa lugha ya Kiswahili. Pili, tukiingia katika mchakato wa siasa ni kwamba, there is a notion that is out there that is you are too elite and lack contact with the common mwananchi, and we know all politics are local. What are your plans to start, having your presence felt in the grassroots so that you can be able to, understand or disseminate that notion that, you are too elite for a common mwananchi? Back to you, Gerald.
Okay, asante from New Jersey. Asante sana watu wa New Jersey.
Okay, asante sana watu wa New Jersey. New Jersey was like my second home when I was working in Washington. Tulikuwa tunaenda kwa Karanja, which is a popular nyama choma place
in New Jersey.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And, to the two questions, Pastor, let me deal with the issue of New Jersey. Okay. It is true that if you're just playing virtual politics by appearing on television and the newspapers without touching the ground, it doesn't work. But I decided, I've just come from a substantial period out of the country, that the first phase of my campaign is go to home states and have opinion leaders from the region and sit down and talk together without cameras, without trying to make it appear in the media. And that way I've covered every constituency in Kwale County, for example, in grassroots engagement, and in every constituency in Mombasa County, every constituency in Trans Nzoia County, 3 constituencies in Kakamega, 4 in Bungoma and counting. But there's a phase of ground level engagement, which I think is important even before I take it to the marketplace. To me, even just this marketplace that you stopped by a market and you are speaking to people through the top or the roof of your car is not going to the ground. There is a certain level of ground that I'm going to, which is below that.
You're engaging the people.
Yes, but starting this weekend, I'm having an important and significant event in my homestead on the 25th, which is like a cultural combination of now go out to the world. And it will be news through the weekend. You'll get to see about it. But starting from that point, I'll be much more on around the country, trips and public address systems and popping out of cars that people are associating with going to the people. But I can assure you, I don't know any other presidential candidate who is drinking busa in Kawangware more than me.
you need to be tagging us as good company.
Yes, I will. I'll start doing that very soon.
Yeah. So the issue of youth.
Yeah. The youth issue I have talked to quite a bit, even in international circles. That there are certain youth enterprises that have to be protected from the harassment of the traditional brick and mortar enterprise treatment. You have a good idea for developing a computer app.
An app, yeah.
That can be very, very interesting innovation on fintech. And you go to bank, you and money, and they ask for your credit rating and your securities. But to my mind, it is a responsibility of the state to ease access to that kind of credit. It's not what government gives us money that will grow enterprise. The first step is government reducing its competition with entrepreneurs in the money markets. But the second step is government doing what in difficult terms is called de-risking. Kwa mfano, serikali hapa Kenya saa zingine inatumia pesa za umma kulipa madeni ya wakulima wa kahawa na wakulima wa majani chai. Hata saa zingine wakulima wa miwa. Kile kiposho pala serikali imetoa hizo pesa. Inaweza kutoa pesa nyingine kutumia kama reinsurance kwa deni linalochukuliwa na vijana ambao wanakopa pesa ili kudevelop an app.
Like a government guarantee.
Yes, not just a government guarantee, government insurance.
Okay.
That there is a certain percentage risk you share with us. If this business fails, government will pay instead of you losing all the money. So de-risking is one of the best ways to make banks give money to enterprise, to small enterprise. Pili, ni kwa mfano nimeona ningependa niige nchi inaitwa Azerbaijan nikiwa rais wa Kenya. Nchi ya Azerbaijan ina sovereign fund ambayo inatumika tu kwa vitu vitatu. Kitu cha kwanza, kukiwa na vita, hizo pesa zitumia kununua bidhaa za kupigana. Kitu cha pili, serikali inatumia for the best students in the country, pass national exams, international exams, to get government scholarships to the best universities in the world. It comes out of the sovereign fund. The third is to build business innovation centers and business incubators. So the way ukitoka chuo kikuu umefuzu, you have an interesting idea to develop an app, even if it's an app in gaming, for example. Unapawa mazingira mwafaka ya serikali ya umma. Kwa mfano utapata secretarial services, electricity, Wi-Fi, office, restrooms, which you stay there and develop this idea. You are given a minimum government stipend, like a salary, for 1 year to see if you can develop an idea. If it grows, you are allowed now to get out of the greenhouse and grow it as an idea outside.
The open market.
If it fails, you have not incurred any debts in trying to test it out. So the risk of testing innovative ideas in the new economy is borne by the state and not by the individual young entrepreneur. So this is one of the ways that I think, smart, innovative ideas of government can be part of the smart solutions to emerging problems.
Oh, okay. All right. So that we about 7 time, I want to throw it through you, Eric, very quickly, because I think we finish in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. Good. I think my last question to Daktari is personal, and I think I represent a lot of young fathers in this country who have very young children. So like my last born daughter is 1 year. If you are to become president of this country, what can my daughter expect from your presidency when she grows up?
All the children that are already conscious will be given a chance to understand that we allow them to be children. To allow children to be children is to create conditions where they don't suffer the pain of taking on adult chores for families to survive. Where children are to be prepared for the next phase, we collectively address what is the best way to unlock the potential, the innate potential in every child, which means giving access to a competitive education and a structured bursary system that grows the predictable pathway for those who are brilliant for the whole of society to benefit from them in the future. But importantly, my government will be obsessed with reducing the tax burden, the debt burden that we bequeath to the next generation. My generation has saddled you with a very huge and sustainable debt right now. We have a responsibility that this is not the heritage that goes to the next generation. So rapid steps in the first few years, for example, retiring expensive debt borrowed on the commercial markets by more favorable bilateral debt is going to be multilateral debt is going to be very, very important. Similarly, working to extend the benefits of the debt service suspension initiative, which Kenya scrambled on board late, but it has been twisted by China not to include Chinese projects in the debt service suspension. So every effort being made while reducing our appetite for living on debt, by reducing the deficit budget financing that has been the character of the last 80 years, I will look to retire expensive debt. I will look to reduce grandiose expenditure. I'll look to grow an economy that services current debt and builds livelihoods and hope for young people. I hope that your 1-year-old daughter will inherit a more hopeful Kenya than the 18-year-old is experiencing today.
Okay. That's some proper hope. I mean, you all worry about the people living behind. Yeah. We are here already. You've seen it. We've felt it. We keep worrying about the people who are going to live behind. And I hope that's a nation that is going to help us build. If God gives an opportunity to be part of this transition. There's something we call tackle of the day. That is your punchline for the day. What would you want to say? What is that one strong message that you would want to send to Kenyans this morning?
Well, I hadn't thought about it, but I'll say this. There is no ethnic solution to a national challenge. The biggest challenges of Kenya are Kenyan challenges. They cannot find tribal solutions.
Okay.
The politics of tribal appeasement is a politics of selective cheating. We have a national responsibility to clearly define what are our national vulnerabilities in this period of transition. What are genuine national solutions to national problems? And what kind of leadership is fashioning itself to deal with national problems as Kenyan problems without making selective ethnic promises as a solution of national challenges? That is my call to Kenyans. And if Kenyans embrace the right message, they'll force politicians to adhere to the right answers.
So we cut the galvanizing. Every other person in a corner, they're sitting in a corner, they're saying, us, we want this. Us, we want this. Sisi kama kina nani, tuataka hivi. Na daktari amesema ya kwamba you cannot build a nation by segregating it. You need to build it around the fabric of the nation. It's been a pleasure having you, sir, and I hope to see you again. We'll be visiting you more often. Nasikia uko na sherehe 25, we will come.
Yes, karibu.
Asante sana. Thanks, Eric, for joining in as well. It's been a pleasure. The guys on YouTube as well, asanteni sana. And the guys on Facebook, it's been a pleasure having you. And I usually say, a day without recharging is a wasted day. Recharge dawa by Peptang, 100% natural wellness drink. Tafuta yako leo and utasikia fiti. Haya, bye bye.
Asanteni sana na kwaheri, nimeshukuru pia.
Asante.
It's been a pleasure, Daktari.
Bye bye.
Still 2 hours.